I was wondering what you think of the idea that some of the major events of the past have also been staged events, and most notably, in my mind, is the JFK assassination. Have you?
No, no, no. I've been involved in serious research on JFK since 1992, and it was very clever. I've identified, I can tell you, the name, rank, and serial number of 6 of the shooters. There may have even been a 7th. One was a deputy sheriff, Harry Weatherford, on top of the county records building, fired a Mannlicher Carcano bullet through a 30-06 using a plastic collar known as a sabot to implant a Mannlicher Carcano bullet in the body. Well, it was real shallow in Jack's back, 5.5 inches below the collar to the right of the spinal column. There was an Air Force expert under the triple underpass who fired a shot that passed through the windshield, hit JFK in the throat. Just before the very famous photograph taken by James I. Calton was recorded, where you can actually see the bullet hole in the windshield, right where JFK's left ear would be if his ear were visible. The driver, William Greer, pulled the limousine to a halt to make sure JFK would be killed. 3 shots were fired from the Dow Tex, the broom closet window of a uranium mining company that was a CIA asset, where an anti-Castro Cuban by the name of Tony Nestor Escadro fired 3 shots. These were the only unsilenced shots with a Mannlicher Carcano, which is such an unreliable weapon. There were 2 misses, but 1 hit. One missed, hit a curbing and injured a distant bystander by the name of James Tague. Another missed and hit the chrome strip over the windshield. The third hit JFK in the back of the head. He slumped forward. Jack eased him back up, was looking him right in the face when he was hitting the right temple by a frangible exploding bullet that had been fired from the intersection of the picket fence and the triple underpass by Frank Sturgis, who was a CIA mafia guy. And it created shockwaves that blew Jack's brains out the back of his head with such force that when they hit Officer Hargis riding there, he initially thought he himself had been shot. Jim Rothstein, a New York Gold Shield detective, arrested Sturgis when he came to New York to kill Marita Lawrence, who had even been a mistress of Fidel Castro and who traveled up to Dallas with some of those who were involved in the shooting. But didn't want to have anything to do with it. She got out of Dallas. She was going to testify before the HSCA when it reinvestigated the case. So Sturgis came there to silence Marita so that she could not testify. When he entered her apartment, Rothstein put a .38 to his head and took him into custody and used a throwaway line with him about good shooting. And Sturgis opened up and said he'd actually been aiming for his eye when he moved slightly and he hit him in the temple instead, and that he'd shot him because he betrayed the brigade at the Bay of Pigs and because he was cavorting with women who were spies for other nations, which I'm sorry to say was true, but Jack didn't betray the brigade. That was set up by the CIA, a false belief they allowed to endure. Another shooter was a Dallas police officer by the name of Roscoe White, who was on the grassy knoll, and they were under strict instructions, Jackie should not be harmed. He pulled his shot, meaning deliberately missed. The bullet wound up in the grass where it was picked up by a police lieutenant later. His son actually discovered his diary, which revealed that he'd been working for the CIA, and unfortunately turned it over to the FBI, where it was destined to disappear. And then there was another shooter in the book depository. No shots were fired from the alleged assassin's lair, but from the opposite side, 1 to 3 shots were fired by Malcolm Mack Wallace, who was Lyndon Johnson's personal hitman. He murdered a dozen people for Lyndon, including one of his own sisters. And he fired 3 shots at John Connally in the mistaken belief that it was Ralph Yarborough, a liberal Texas senator whom Lyndon despised. He had a huge fat fight with JFK that morning to get Connally out and Yarborough in, but Jack overrode him on the ground that the chief executive of the state should ride with the chief executive of the United States. The key player in the entire assassination was Lyndon Johnson. He forced himself on the ticket in Los Angeles in 1960. He wasn't even on Jack or Bobby's long list, much less their short. Jack had already extended the invitation to Stuart Symington in Missouri to run with him, but gave him overnight to think about it when Bobby went by the Johnson suite to extend a pro forma invitation. He was dumbfounded that Johnson leaped on it. He threatened to expose that Jack had had dalliances with women who were spies for other countries, information he had been provided by J. Edgar Hoover. and that if he would reveal that Jack had Addison's disease and therefore wasn't expected to live a long, healthy life, and if he were not on the ticket, that in his position as majority leader of the Senate, he'd bottle up any legislative proposals sent down by the White House, which would be dead on arrival. Bobby and Jack tried to figure a way around it, but it became impossible. When it was announced to the convention that Lyndon would be running with JFK, one of Lyndon's richest supporters burst into the Johnson suite just swearing about this betrayal. Bobby Baker took him into a bedroom and explained to him what they had in mind, and he came out all smiles and said that sounded like a fine plan, where Bobby Baker would later be quoted as saying that JFK would not live out his term and would die a violent death. Lyndon even sent his chief administrative aide, Cliff Carter, to Dallas to make sure all the arrangements were in place for the assassination.
Who was that? There was a deathbed confession who said that he was a bench warmer on the KD bench.
Yeah, you're talking about E. Howard Hunt. He's often been supposed to be the third of the three tramps, but that's false. That was Chauncey Marvin Holt, whom I got to know personally. He was working as a contract agent for the CIA and prepared 15 sets of Ford Secret Service credentials for use in and around Dealey Plaza. E. Howard Hunt was a spy master for the agency, a very fertile mind. He published all kinds of books about conspiracies, many of which appear to have been based on fact. When he was about, or thought he was about to die, he gave a confession to his son, St. John, whom I have met, saying that the chain of command went from Lyndon Johnson to Cord Meyer, who was in charge of CIA covert activities, to David Adley Phillips, in charge of CIA Western Hemisphere, William Harvey, who was in head of a lot of assassinations, and David Sanchez Morales. And below him were the various shooters I've been describing and their supervisors, one of whom, by the way, I mentioned that Nestor Tony Escadro fired those 3 shots from the Dowtex. His supervisor was standing right behind him, was George H.W. Bush.